I'm really excited to be here. I am really excited, but inside I am a little uncomfortable right now because I have a confession to make. I actually have a fear of public speaking, and I couldn't have chosen a better place or time to say this than in front of a lot of people on stage, but I will explain why that's important a little bit later. When I was little, I used to draw a lot, and art was kind of my first language that I was comfortable with before I could really speak up. And when I was 7 years old, my mom got a call from my teacher, and she said to my mom, you know, Evelyn, she does these amazing drawings, she's great at art, but I'm really concerned about her. You know, it's been 2 weeks since she started school, and she hasn't said a single word. Does she know how to speak English, or is she shy? And I was like, you know, growing up with immigrant parents from South Korea, I didn't really like to speak up for two reasons. Because one, you know, I always fell behind from the kids that were raised in a household that spoke perfect English. And then two, my family were not very expressive communicators. You know, we didn't really say I love you that much, but we really knew how to get really angry at each other, and that's how you showed you cared. And so I knew deep down I wanted to kind of break out of this shell and, you know, show my teacher who I really am. And for me, it's always been a struggle to find my voice because, you know, I'm standing here, I'm telling you, like, I have a fear of public speaking, but I also have a desire to be brave. So today I want to kind of share with you a time I fought to get over my fears and, like, break out of my shell, and I got more creative by being more vulnerable. So last year I got stuck, and three things happened to me in 2015. I started doing these things called design sprints, and then I quit my job at Google after 8.5 years to go to Uber. And then I saw this fantastic movie called Inside Out. How many of you have seen that movie? Yeah, I love it. So it's a Pixar movie, and it's about child psychology and this little girl named Riley, and all of these, like, emotions in her head as she's kind of going through this transition from moving from Minnesota to California in San Francisco. So I'm going to play you a short clip. I want you to pay attention to how she's, like, feeling inside.
So, how was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay,
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Something is definitely going on.
She's never acted like this before. What should we do? We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband. Ahem.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
He's making that stupid face again.
I could strangle him right now.
Signal him again.
Ah, so, Riley, how was school?
You gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
Boo! I'll be Joy.
School was great, all right?
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
What is her deal? All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude. No. Stay happy!
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it!
Yeah, well...
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
Just shut up!
Fire!
That's it. Go to your room. Now.
The foot is down. The foot is down.
I love that movie. To me, that was like the clearest explanation of how I was when I was young. And you know, like Riley, we all have these emotions: joy, sadness, disgust, anger, and fear. And if I were to tell you how I would stack rank this, my favorite to my least favorite, it would look something like fear is my best friend, followed by disgust, anger, sadness, and joy. Joy and I are not that close. And so I spent a lot of time consumed with fear because it would constantly remind me of things like, oh, you're only a designer, or you're a woman, you're Asian, you're not creative enough, you're not smart enough. And I mean, fear was constantly reminding me that I was not enough. But at the same time, I always want to prove fear wrong. And I knew there were other aspects of me that were kind of responsible for who I am as a creative person. And these guys have always kind of inspired me to do things like, you know, different types of map making and at Google Maps when I was there. And we did like different types of storytelling and visual storytelling and designing for good user experience design. And so, you know, these things represent who I am on the inside, but it's like absolutely nothing like who I am on the outside. On the outside, I'm like more like this frozen person. And so case in point, like I asked my mom to send me a bunch of photos of me growing up when I was young, and you'll notice that I have this consistent frozen expression on my face. But no one knew that I was actually really happy inside. But for whatever reason, I was just more comfortable kind of being like unemotional and even-keeled, and to me it was like all about being safe on the inside. I didn't want to be too vulnerable. And I remember this one time that my manager at Google told me, like, you know, Evelyn, there's this really hard project I need you to be on. It's a lot of tough collaboration. You know, teams are not aligned. And I said, oh, don't worry. I got this. I have a high tolerance for pain. And so what I was trying to tell her was that I'm so numb on the outside that no amount of personal tragedy or career failures could like infiltrate this cold, hard exterior. And I was really proud of this. But you know, you can imagine how happy my husband is. He's always coming at me like this, and I'm always giving him this response. So I was happy. I was like, that's my happy face. But I always liked that in my early times, and even through by the time I graduated Rhode Island School of Design in 2004, I had studied graphic design, and I was going to a startup in Santa Monica, and honestly, I felt a little self-conscious graduating art school because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to earn a living to pay off all my tuition loans, and you know, my early 20s was all about safe decisions. And I was walking down a cereal aisle at the local grocery store one time, and I was like trying to decide if I could afford like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes or the market brand knockoff. And I was like struggling over this $1 I was going to save, but it was so important at the time because I didn't want to. I wanted to like be able to afford to feed myself, and I knew like my mom had spent a ton of money paying for this tuition. And I didn't want her to think that she raised a starving artist. So to me, it was like, I need a more secure, safe job. And so I went to Google. And it was like awesome. And the answer to my prayers is I got like all of this free food. And I was like, oh, no, seriously, this is why I applied originally. It was gourmet every day. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to eat free food, and I'm going to learn about user experience design, which I didn't really understand what it was at the time. And my first project was working on Google Earth. But then there was like free bowling on campus, and it was like, who has time to work when you can play? And then I became part of this like weird tech bubble because it was kind of new to me, like as a designer artist. I didn't really think I'd fit into Silicon Valley. And then people were like taking naps at work, and I was like, who has time to actually do stuff? But to me, it was like I felt really fortunate, and it was comfortable, and it was secure, and it was stable, but it just made me want to like crack at some point because well, basically what happened was in 2012, I was standing up here at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and I was giving a talk on the history of redesign at Google. And what had happened was in 2011, Larry Page became CEO, and he initiated this project to kind of redesign across the entire company in like 30 days. And it was a big deal because nobody thought an engineered-focused company could put design and beauty on the forefront. He even went and changed the mission statement and values on our website. And so it was a big deal to be on this stage and talk to a bunch of people with a panel of 5 folks. And you can see me off in the right corner there. And I posted on Facebook, and I was like, all I can think about was like, there's a sea of 700 faces in this room, and my face was getting hot and red, and my voice was shaking, and I was like so nervous, and it took every energy out of me to like just calm myself down, not get stage fright. But like at that point, I was just kind of like, oh, I'm so tired of keeping it safe, and if I could just be myself and brave, and how much more creative could I be, and how much more could I offer this world if I could just get over this. And you know, by the time it was over, I felt like, you know those defibrillators that like send electric currents into your body when you go into cardiac arrest? It felt like that. I mean, I've never gone to cardiac arrest, but I imagine it felt like that. It was like all of this creative adrenaline, and I thought like, wow, like how can I ignite that kind of feeling of engagement and fear and bravery all the time? Like I want to feel that all the time. And it was really fear that woke me up to do these things called design sprints. And I kind of accidentally fell into this because at the time I didn't realize, it's very similar to like being on stage but doing like a creative live action like skit. And design sprints are really intense and fun. But to kind of explain what these are, I'm going to first tell you what the creative process at Google is like in a nutshell, because there's a lot of different ways to produce products at Google. This was kind of my experience on Google Maps. And what you do is like you start with an idea, and you work with a product manager or a researcher, and you kind of understand the user problem or needs. And this idea then develops with engineers who kind of tell you what the technical constraints are. And then you kind of build and design and kind of get more feedback from users and to make sure you're on track. And then eventually you launch it. And then there's this period of learning from that. And then that whole cycle repeats again. And this whole process takes anywhere between like a couple months to a couple years. And design sprints was like really fast. It would do that in just 5 days, going through that whole cycle in just 5 days. So I did design sprints for a number of reasons. First, I was like, I want to be able to create this illusion of a fast startup inside Google Maps. And I wanted to also take conceptually risky ideas and develop them and not like be judged for their technical holes. I also wanted it to be hands-on and fun. And I wanted to do it with a sidekick. And so this is Jess, she's on the right, and she and I were design facilitators. She was like joy, and I was like sadness. She was like super happy, and I was like super serious, and I always wanted to kind of be like her. And so together, we decided to do this thing called a delight sprint. And it was like my favorite sprint I did at Google. And what it was the goal was to come up with 30 different creative ideas of how to make Google Maps so delightful for users. This is the sort of process we do when we're doing like those April Fool's stuff, like the Pac-Man and Pokemon things you see on April 1st. And so we decided to do that with a bunch of, like about 25 people. And we went to Switzerland and to our Zurich office and set this up for 5 days. And we did really interesting, fun activities, like we pretended if Google Maps was a product, what would the packaging design look like? And we also did things like, we got like physical and played musical chairs with the engineers and product managers. And we also blew lots of bubbles. And all of these icebreaker activities were important because we had to create this environment of extreme delight and fun in order to come up with some like really novel and creative ideas. And so the way design sprints work is like on day one, you unpack a ton of information in short 10-minute lightning talks covering the research, design, and engineering. And then you write down all these like wider questions on Post-it notes and you start clustering them into themes. And those themes get carried over to what we called Crazy Eights. They're like fast design sketching, where you take an idea or a theme and you take a piece of paper, fold into eights, and you come up with 8 different fast ideas in under 8 minutes. And so it was like the crazier the better. And then you would choose that and then build a prototype that you could then use or test. And this was like 5 days. It was like a lot of fun. I felt like I was like in this whole other world. And when it was over, I felt like so deflated because it was like so intense. You go from this high to crashing low that I felt like I had to do it every 3 to 4 weeks for about a year. I did this every month for about a year. It was exhausting, but it became like this coping mechanism because I was like trying to revisit this energy I got out of it. And the reason, like, I realized the reason I liked doing Design Sprint was because to me, it was like this illusion of happiness that I created, and I constructed a world in which I could lay bare all of like my feelings, my anger, my sadness, joy, all these like vulnerabilities to a group of people that kind of accepted my discomfort, and they followed my rules, and they came up with like some pretty daring designs. And so I think what was interesting and ironic was that the sprint was about user happiness, and it was like happiness was like what ended up punctuating my career at Google. And I felt like I needed to go to a place in which I could take more risk, be a little bit uncomfortable, and be kind of have that kind of pressure and drive. Because originally I came to Google, you know, for security, stability, comfort, and it was like my safe environment, and I needed something else. So I ended up going to Uber. And oh man, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, because it was like really, my first week was like clouded with a lot of ambiguity. I wasn't sure if I was, you know, all my fears came back. I wasn't sure I was going to be good enough, and was myself enough, and could I handle the velocity? Could I handle, you know, the organized chaos? And, you know, the reality is like, Uber's not really a small company anymore. It's a young, revolutionary, you know, slightly unpopular company right now, but they're so fearless in their pursuit of like how to change cities and the way cities move, and making transportation as accessible as like running water. And that's such a bold, kind of risky, fierce sort of goal. And then my question was like, could I really have personal growth in this type of environment? Could I really be myself and break out of the shell? And so I decided I was going to do like a design sprint, except they call those design jams at Uber because they're a lot faster and quicker. So I took my team out and we did this like fun icebreaker exercise where we took a piece of paper and we drew a circle, and you wrote your name at the top, and then you handed it over to your left. And every time you rotated the piece of paper, you had to draw a person's like feature, their mouth, the eyes, the nose, the hair. And so by the time it was done, you had like a pretty funny portrait of your team. And what was interesting was like, this was like how the team sees you, and this is their perception of you. And on the back of that, what we did was, on the back we had everyone write down interesting like things about that person. And I'll share with you what my team wrote about me that I found like pretty surprising. And they used words like, you know, always positive, open, genuine, encouraging, passionate. And I was kind of a little bit surprised at how many like happy words there were, because what the team saw in me was this concept of joy. And what I realized was that, you know, despite this serious face, I was kind of unafraid to be myself and show a little bit more vulnerability. And I think sometimes when we're like faced with our fears, we just like naturally protect ourselves and want to go someplace safe. But maybe the real potential is that you don't want to be this egg. You really want to just be like a chicken, right? Except you want to be the bravest chicken, like this guy here. And I think sometimes, you know, my message is pretty simple. It's just that, you know, sometimes our emotions inside of us are what drive our creativity, and the world needs to see more of that vulnerability, because it's what's going to conquer your fears. It's what's going to unlock a lot of your potential. And for me, that's how I found joy. And in a lot of cases, like standing here is like really intense, really scary, But, you know, I can't wait for what happens next because I truly believe that everything that you've ever wanted is going to be on the other side of fear. Thank you.